Okay, good morning, everybody. Uh, Happy New Year to everybody, first of all. We are going to start our second workshop on JPEG DNA. This time we have three excellent speakers lined up. The first one is Daniel Chadash, who's going to tell us about DNA Data Storage Alliance and provide an overview. That will be followed by Professor Thomas Heines from Imperial College, who will tell us about Oligo Archive, which is a future emerging technology a FET project financed by the European Commission. And last but not least, we will hear from Dr. Alan Dufault from EPFL, who will tell us about actually one of the main applications, which is the long-term preservation, and in this case, it's the Montreux Jazz Digital Project. The recording has already started. We are going to let the speakers make presentation. I invite everybody to wait with their questions until the wrap-up session, once the last presentation finishes, we are going to stop the recording, and the questions won't be recorded. So if somebody feels they don't want to have on record their question, they will be free to do that. I would like to ask also, if possible, please mute your microphones as usual, so that it doesn't interfere. So if you don't talk, please mute your microphones. All right, so maybe one last thing before I leave the floor to Daniel, is that this workshop has been co-organized by Fernando Pereira, who is my colleague and long friend since almost 3 decades now. We are both co-chairs of a ad hoc group called JPEG DNA. And one of the goals of these workshops is to really understand what are the needs and where, if any, JPEG committee can help. All right, now let's move the floor to Daniel. Daniel, he's from Twist Bioscience. Daniel, I let you share your screen.
Thank you, Turaj. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invite. I only have 20 minutes, so I try to focus more on the Alliance and what brought us to do the Alliance, and not on what is DNA data storage, because I assume this crowd knows the basics and know how it works, and know why it is a good storage medium. So I'll focus mainly on the Alliance and what brought us to make this Alliance, and overview of it and some challenges. Can you see my screen? I tried on presentation mode.
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Great, so before I dive into the Alliance, a background about me. I joined Twist as Twist acquired my company almost 4 years ago, almost 5 now. We built an IDE for engineering of DNA. And since January last year, I moved to the DNA data storage product at Twist, and I took on me the commercial side of the business of the product. And part of that, I did the work to establish the Alliance. So it all started, as I said, in January 2020. And when I come to a problem, I usually go and talk to customers. First, I want to hear the needs, I want to hear the requirements, I want to hear the problems and the challenges. So we spoke with many people who are in this field, who are in digital preservation, and they need to preserve a lot of data for a very long periods of time. And from all those interviews, it started to come up that there need to be some kind of a forum to help this technology. New technology is hard to digest for many people, and especially when you talk with IT people, they're not so happy about inserting a new technology into their system, into their architecture, and especially when it is DNA. Let's say that you're bringing, let's say, another type of hard drive from Western Digital, or another type of tape, or another type of software, they're okay with it. But once you tell them, okay, you want to have DNA in your data center, this is like mind-blowing, and it's very hard for people to digest that and to understand how this works. So, and especially when we come and talk to them as Twist Bioscience, because we are used to talk to biologists, to PIs, to people in this industry, and IT people never heard about Twist Bioscience, and a lot in the IT world are based on trust and companies that you know and companies that you work with. So you will be it will be much easier for you to install a new product or software from Microsoft rather than install like a DNA system from Twist. So this was another challenge that we heard when we talked to customers. Another thing was that archival storage is a different game. DNA storage is mainly tailored for archival because of the latency of read and write and the price now, and it's more tailored for archival storage that is mainly write once, read never, or write once, read seldom. And in this game, there needs to be a lot of trust, reliability. There is no tolerance for mistakes, because people put in their archives their most precious data that they need to preserve for many, many years. And people want to be independent in the technology. They don't want to be dependent on one company. And all of those things led me to kind of think, okay, how do we solve this problem, and how do we create trust with our users, and how do they know that there is companies that are with big names and great technology behind it, and how it would be the best way to bring this new technology into the market. And what we did was to study what happened in other kind of technologies. So we looked at LTO and the great things it did to the tape industry, into the storage industry, that right now you can move between the providers of tape, and you have a standard of tape and backward compatibility and all those things. We look at USB, we look at open source. All of those were great examples of when companies collaborate together, they have much easier time to insert a new technology into the market, because customers would trust if there are a lot of companies behind it, if it's companies that they know, if it's big names behind it, and if those companies play together, so the customer can earn that they can switch between each company and not have to worry about that things won't work. So all those things led us to the conclusion that in order to make DNA data storage a reality, we need to build an alliance of great companies with great names, with trusted names in the industry, that would want to push this technology forward. And especially when we're talking about archival storage, as I mentioned before, a customer wants to save their data for 100 years. Who knows if Twist will be around in 100 years, if Microsoft, if Western Digital, or if any members of the alliance will be there in 100 years. And this is why it's a key thing that there will be interoperability, and the customer will feel trust that they have a technology that they can operate on their own. They're not dependent on one company, and the products between the companies work really well. So it led us to the conclusion that we need to build an alliance to move this forward. The alliance was formed on October 12, 2020. The founders are Illumina, Microsoft, Twist, and Western Digital. We decided to go on a very lightweight structure. The idea is that we wanted to support expansions. We want for other members to join easily, because the broader the alliance will be, the more power it will have, and the more effect it will have on the market. And also will allow us to move fast and be agile. So far we have 18 members and growing, and there are a few that are joining next week. And our mission, as we defined it, it's quite like a huge sentence, but I'll try to read it slowly. So it is to create and promote a new zettabyte scale, enduring, always recoverable, format stable, widely adopted and cost-effective archival storage ecosystem for the explosive growth of digital data based on DNA. So basically, our mission is really to help the world cope with the amounts of data that is growing all the time, and the current storage mediums does not fit the mission to store data for hundreds of years. And how do we do that as an alliance? So our first mission is to educate and create awareness. We want to make sure that people understand that DNA data storage is no longer science fiction. It is real, it is working, and it has the potential to be a major part in the data center. So here we want to educate by writing white papers, by attending events, by doing webinars, by doing lectures, and all that to show that this technology is working and has great potential. We are also working to develop use cases in different markets and industries. So we want to kind of look at each industry and understand their special needs in terms of storage and archival storage, and to make sure that we build the right product for the right market. One of the outcomes that we also hope to have in 2021 is to develop a technical roadmap, industrial roadmap for DNA data storage. So IT managers and investors and the media and everyone here and of the Alliance will understand where this technology is going and when to expect it to have some major milestones. And eventually we want to get into create standards and specifications. Right now it's a bit too early, but we hope that in next year we'll start to develop specifications and standards in order to enable the interoperability between the different technology vendors. The Alliance members, as I said, those are the founders, and those are the other members. We have ANSA Biotechnologies, Catalog DNA, the Club Node Foundation, DNA Script, EPFL, ETH Zurich, IMAC, Iridium, Molecular Assemblies, QS2, Quantum, Seagate, and the University of Washington. So you see here, Western Digital, Quantum, and Seagate, one of the biggest storage providers, are part of the Alliance, and this shows the trust and the belief that they have in this technology. The activities that we are doing, so the first thing is now we are working on building a website. We want to have a presence for the Alliance on the web and social networks. We want a place to be able to publish the content that we're going to make, the videos, articles, white papers, and to notify about events that we will host or participate in. We are looking into to publishing 3 white papers this year. One is Intro to DNA Data Storage, one is the technical roadmap, and one is the requirements and use cases by different industries. And in terms of the structure, we are having a monthly all members meeting, and the founders meet like every week. And we also do some special events, and both Ellen and Turaj here were part of those meetings and those events. A bit about the challenges of doing an alliance with almost 20 members and growing. So the first thing is alignment. It's not easy to keep everyone in sync on where we are now, what we need to do, what are the next steps, to remind people if they have some task to do. Because this is kind of a secondary job for a lot of people. They have their main job in their company, but they're also part of this alliance that require them to do that extra thing that maybe is not defined in their job description and kind of requires some extra time and extra effort. In order to launch a publication, there are dependencies between the companies, and each one is waiting on the other one, and we kind of need to keep everyone in sync. So this is also a challenge to get like a publication, a white paper, an event, a presentation, whatever it is. It requires to coordinate a lot of people from different companies. Another thing is the scheduling. So it's the same thing as the dependencies. Need to try to find time in people like very busy schedules, and it's not very easy. And the last thing is that the Alliance right now is not a legal entity yet. This is a promoter group, so we are working on making it a legal entity, but until we have that, it's kind of a structure that doesn't allow us to have a proper budget or a proper job descriptions, or a certain person that is responsible to manage the alliance, and this is their main job. So as I said, for all of us, it's kind of a secondary job. But I think that once we'll evolve into like a proper alliance, a legal entity, we'll have a bank account, we'll have like bylaws and things like that, and it will make things a bit easier to move forward. That's about it. That's about the alliance and where we are and what we did and what made us do the alliance and build it.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I propose that we keep, I'm sure there are many questions. We keep the questions to after all presentations have been made. So I would like to now ask Thomas, please, to share his screen and tell us about Oligo Archive.
Yes, indeed. Let me start sharing. Is this working?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk here today. So I'd like to present kind of Oligo Archive. Where did we start with Oligo Archive? Essentially, it's probably a slide you've seen before in the previous workshop, in the sense that the major motivation of Oligo Archive is the same as most of the DNA storage efforts, is that the understanding that loads of data is essentially today needs to be preserved for a long time. More than 60% of archival data is stored longer than 20 years. And with today's technology, with tape, disk, etc., this can present a challenge in the sense that we all these storage media do not last longer than 20 years, and that does need to be, the data needs to be migrated between media time and again, right? And so that is the reason essentially why people are looking into DNA storage. And so we essentially wanted to set up a project. We started collaborating between the partners before the project even, to study synthetic DNA as a viable alternative to traditional storage media, right? And the reason being, in my opinion, the most important one, I already mentioned that, it's a very durable storage medium. It lasts decades, if not hundreds of years. I think realistically, we need to look into being able to store data for longer than 100 years, maybe not necessarily thousands of years. Other reasons also are that it's essentially a very compact storage medium. That makes it interesting as well. It's cheap in the sense that, I mean, this has a bit of a caveat here, but what I mean by cheap is essentially that we can migrate and copy data quite easily because of biomolecular processes, which are very energy efficient and also highly scalable. And then also finally, and there are more reasons than that, but one reason I want to mention really is that the building blocks for DNA, to build DNA, are just abundantly available, as opposed to silicon, where we apparently are running out of, right? So that's why we essentially started working together within the consortium. Most of the partners have been working together before. And then we asked the European Commission for funding, and kind as they are, they indeed sponsored the project, which involves 6 partners, but more about this later on. And in the rest of the presentation, I'd just like to basically go through, talk about what we set out to do. And we started about a little bit more than a year ago, but were of course interrupted, like probably everyone, due to the pandemic. But I want to talk about what we set out to do, and I'm also going to give a very brief glimpse of what we've already done in the project, or I'll give examples. I mean, we have 6 partners, and we do a lot of interesting work, and I can't cover all of it, but just want to give an overview of basically what we set out to do. So we want to essentially, for example, we want to work on efficiently encoding different types of information. structured and unstructured. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on. And I think the unstructured one, and I put this into brackets here, images, should probably be of most interest to the audience here, right? Beyond that, we also want to see if we can implement processes that we know, data analysis processes that we know on traditional hardware, on traditional computing hardware. We want to see if we can implement this as biomolecular processes, as we call this a kind of a near molecule data analysis, such that we can analyze the data in vitro and don't have to take it out, read it out, get it on to traditional computing platforms and then do the data analysis there. Further, we want to look into sequencing. Want to particularly look at the software part. We made an early decision when we put the project together that sequencing in itself is already fairly cheap, so such that we don't need to spend tremendous effort on the hardware there, developing it ourselves, right? It's when I say it's comparatively cheap, more importantly, the market is such that there's enough demand to drive the sequencing costs lower, right? Because of precision medicine, just generally sequencing use cases, there's enough market demand and enough innovation with nanopore, etc., with some nanopore sequencing to drive the price down there. Then, very important, as opposed to sequencing, synthesis is still very costly. And so we also want to focus on the synthesis technology. One of our partners is looking into developing faster and cheaper synthesis technology. And finally, we want to basically do end-to-end automation. Our approach, and I think this slide summarizes this quite well, we essentially want to, we look at this very much as kind of at least the organization of the project as computer scientists. We basically want to do a layered approach at the application layer, where we look at how can we encode the data, the operating system layer, how can we implement the file system as abstraction, the controller layer, where we have the data processing capabilities, and finally the media layer, which is really where the media is, where we store the information, which essentially entails synthesis and sequencing. And we have the partners working across all these layers, and we have different partners, of course, partners on the, I'm going to say, more biological side, partners more on the computing side. This is clearly an interdisciplinary effort where we need to kind of bring different disciplines together and work together on that. Good, so I want to go over the different layers. First off, the application layer, right? The idea there really is to find, for certain types of data, different encodings. The understanding basically being that we have different types of data, and different types of data have different requirements. I mentioned here that text requires high fidelity, right? We can't tolerate too many errors when it comes to text. Whereas when it comes to images, probably also audio, video, we can tolerate certain errors, right? Without compromising the result, the experience of ultimately the user after recovering the data too much. So we want to kind of bring in this type of aware encoding. We particularly want to look at or distinguish between structured data and unstructured data. Structured data being text files, XML, relational database, and unstructured being essentially images, audio, video, and others. And I'm going to make an example just on the next slides about that. But I want to finish kind of the application layer before. Good, so like I said, right, also these different types of data all have different requirements in terms of error characteristics. And that means we can use different error correction codes. That could also mean that we can use different synthesis technology that is cheaper but has more errors we could use for unstructured data, and so on. What I'm trying to make here is really a case that different data requires different encoding and different underlying technology. And then also, The same goes for the decoding. So, we have, when we encode structured information, or we store structured information in DNA sequences, in oligos, then we have some inherent knowledge about the structure. And what we're trying to do with the type-aware decoding is exploit this knowledge again, right? We know, for example, we have fixed length fields in the sequences. We can exploit that when decoding, and we can potentially decode faster, right? So that's essentially the idea. And then we also want to come up with new machine learning techniques, base calling, kind of like mapping the signal of the sequencer to the base pair to the bits. Is something that's based on machine learning. And I think if we can somehow use that inherent structural information in that process, we can accelerate that process. And with that, also make it cheaper. Good. I want to make a quick example. I want to make a little bit of a deep dive into this type-aware encoding. Just with an example here, I mentioned before, we want to look at the encoding structured data. Structured data is relational databases, XML, text data, etc. Right? I'm going to use the example of a relational database because me and also other partners in the project, some of which are on the call now, Raja and also Mark and Melpo, we all work together on an example where we encoded a relational database, right? And you may remember some of it from the database course. But this essentially, what I'm showing here is a very small table with a couple of rows. And if we don't encode this type-aware, if we don't take the type of data into account, we just encode it and store it as one big blob. Meaning that if we decode it, we have to read it as one big blob again and then take it apart on the computer, right? So what we said is that's no good. We have some inherent structure in here. And so what we do is, for a table like this, we store each of the rows on one DNA sequence, right? Or if it's a very long row, we store it in multiple DNA sequences. That's the basic idea. We do this with every table and then have one row, one oligo, one DNA sequence per row. And why is that a good thing? Why should we do this? Well, like I said before, right, we have different error correction requirements, so we can bake that in. More importantly, however, we also can selectively retrieve a small subset of this data, right? We no longer have to decode, read back, pull it through sequencing the whole table. We can go and basically use biomolecular techniques like PCR, etc., to selectively retrieve certain rows, only the ones that we're interested in. That's important because reading back the whole table is unnecessary, puts a lot of pressure on the sequencing, and also means that we need to decode or do a lot of computational work to ultimately retrieve the data. So it accelerates the process and makes it faster. When I say process, I mean the selective retrieval process, right? Then also another benefit of that is that we can implement certain database operations, say certain data analytics operations directly on the DNA sequences. By that I mean, this is basically data analytics operations like content detection, like also on database operation. Those of you who remember from the database course, what a join is, right? We want to join tables, we want to find rows that have one attribute, without one attribute is the same. And we've done this already in vitro. So we used kind of the hybridization or annealing process between different oligos, right, to ensure that we can bind these oligos or these DNA sequences together if they share one of the attributes. So basically, we're really pushing operations into the DNA. That's why we call it near molecule data processing, really with the purpose of essentially making sure we can reduce the amount of data retrieved. It makes it faster, it makes it cheaper ultimately. It also has the interesting benefit that we will see this in our experiments, of course. The operation might also be quicker in vitro than it is on the computer. Good. That's all I wanted to say about encoding structured data. We want to apply these principles not just to databases, but also to text, XML, and other types of documents to ensure that we exploit the structure of the data really. And I understand that Mark has been presenting the encoding of unstructured data in the last and previous workshop, and I'm going to just briefly also want to talk about this here. This is, of course, some of Mark's and Melpo's lovely work they have done in the past already. Essentially, the idea of using a principled mapping approach of data to sequences such that we can reduce the error in the data retrieved, right? And like I mentioned, this is unstructured data typically, not always, but typically tolerates a bit more error than text data. But again, then thanks to the work of Mark and Melpo, right, we can reduce that error even further if we are clever about how we do that. But I assume most of you have, of those of you who have been joining the last workshop, have seen a lot of this work already. Good. With that, I want to move back to the project and what we plan to do. So we also want to, I'm going to go through the layers as I set out initially. So we want to also implement an operating system layer, and with that what we want to accomplish there is really have a sort of addressing capability, right? Disk and tape both have a block interface. We can retrieve specific elements of the storage, and DNA by default does not have so. So we want to investigate what we can do, if we can use barcoding techniques, etc., to again specifically retrieve and sequence subsets of the data. Then moving on to the controller layer. Really, this is a little bit probably more aspirational, although we've done some of the work already and showed the feasibility. This is really the idea of pushing operations on the data directly into the storage to reduce the amount of data being read back. This is something that we are doing for DNA storage, but this is also something that is happening for tape and disk, where we try to push operation as close to the data as possible, because most storage medium, even also disk and tape, obviously have a limited bandwidth. So we want to push the filter of how much data we read back as close as possible to the data, right? And for DNA storage, the bandwidth is also limited, and even less obviously as for traditional storage media. Good. Then moving on to the media layer, here we have one partner who is working on cost-effective synthesis, like I said, and it's also my personal belief that one of the major roadblocks for the adoption of DNA storage is the cost of synthesis. Sequencing is getting there, it's very close already, but synthesis is a major roadblock, and so they essentially try to optimize the process, the building process, and make this as cheap and as scalable as possible. Then finally, we also look into automation for all aspects of it, and that's why, if you remember the image, the schema I showed at the beginning, had the arrow of automation across all the layers. It affects everything. We need to automate all the processes. Loads of this work at the moment is lab-based, and we simply need to make sure that we can use robotics to automate these processes. Otherwise, it's not going to scale. Good. So that's basically what we set out to do. I just want to briefly also mention kind of who the partners are indeed. That is me and also other partners at Imperial here in the UK. Then we have the Université Nice and CNRS in the south of France. That is Marc Melpo being at Université Nice, and Raja, who is also on the call, who's at Eurecom. And finally, we have HelixWorks, a small startup in Ireland, in Cork, who is working on the cost-efficient synthesis techniques for the data storage. Good. I think that was a very high level and brief overview of what we do. It's a 3-year project. We only just started. We're interrupted by the pandemic, but we're very, like you saw, I hope you agree that this is a very ambitious and exciting researchers agenda that we set out to do. I understand that questions are not to be asked now. We'll save that for the end. But I also want to say here, if you're interested in doing a pilot, a small pilot, anything, we're very open to that. So please do get in touch if you have a use case, anything you'd like to do to test this technology. All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It was great presentation. I'm sure there are again a lot of questions, but let's move them to the discussion session at the end and use the remaining time to hear from Alan about the Montreux Jazz Festival Digital Archive and everything around that. So I think that if you could just stop sharing so that then Alan can share his slide. I leave the floor to Alan.
Yeah, thank you to Raj. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to present this project today. So I will speak about the Montreux Jazz digital project. You know that in Montreux, there is this famous festival from 1967. And we got in touch at EPFL, and Touraj was one of the first person involved, by the way, with the Montreux Jazz Festival in 2007 already. We started a collaboration just later on to digitize this audiovisual archive. I will talk about it in more details afterwards, which is really consequent and important. And digitize was one of the objectives, but then for EPFL, of course, the idea was to use this content, this audiovisual collection for research and in many different fields like acoustics, image processing, neuroscience, really a lot and a large scale of domains, including not only technology, but as well culture, and DNA as well, because we got in touch with bioscience and Daniel already in 2017. So we built a center at EPFL to take care about those two objectives: digitize and add value to the archive using research, using innovation. So now this archive has become really a research infrastructure for the researchers, and not only at EPFL, but worldwide, really, with a lot of partners, schools of arts, and in many domains like social and human sciences. Really a large project. So let me maybe speak a little bit about the frame of this project. The Montreux Jazz Festival was created in 1967. And this person you see here, Claude Nobs, is really at the origin of everything, because he had a vision when creating his festival in Montreux. The goal was to record all the concerts in his mind, and this was really not usual at the time, to record the concerts in audio and in video and in really the best quality. State-of-the-art equipment were used all along the 50 years and even more now of the festival. So technology and state-of-the-art was really one of the philosophy of the festival. Some people even said that the festival was actually a studio with some public at the beginning, to show you at which point it was centered on technology and high quality. So it started in this way, and really you can see here some pictures about this view, the recordings in 1991. HD was already used 15 years before the public started really to see HD. A few pictures about the festival here and the chalet of Claude Nobs in Caux. One vision was technology, but the other one, of course, one other talent of Claude was the welcome and his friendship with all the artists. So it was not only about technology, it was really about having all the best talents in music coming to Montreux. And how could he do that? Getting all those stars, David Bowie, Miles Davis, and so many great musicians. It was because of his talent in welcoming them. The musicians came in Montreux for spending a good time. They were kind of on a holidays. Claude was a chef, and he could even cook for them. They could spend a few days there, enjoying the region. You can see here the view from the top of the mountain in Montreux. And they knew that if they would come to Montreux, they would go back home with a tape and with really a high quality recording that they would be able to use afterwards to promote their art. Claude was helped in the construction of the festival by several events that were not connected to what he did, but the most famous one, if you know the festival, this will not surprise you, was the burning of the casino. The hall where the festival used to take place in 1971 was destroyed during a concert by Frank Zappa, because a guy sent a rocket to the ceiling, and the ceiling was made of papers and bamboo, and it started burning. People didn't see immediately what the importance of this, but then the casino was fully destroyed. Nobody was hurt. Everybody could go out. And in the hall, there was this famous group, Deep Purple, and they wrote Smoke on the Water at that opportunity, actually. And then it was a big tune everywhere in the world. And at several times during the festival, this came again with other artists being known everywhere and promoting the festival everywhere. In the end, 50 years afterwards, we have really a big series of, large series of artists which recognize the festival as one of the most important testimonial to the history of music, especially of course, in jazz, but not only. The Montreux Jazz Festival is really about everything. So blues, rock, and now the latest musical genre as well. We have a digitization project initiated in 2007, really started in 2010 at EPFL, the creation of a foundation to keep and preserve this archive, the Claude Nobs Foundation, and registration to UNESCO in 2013. The whole collection, audio and video, was recognized in the Memory of the World program, and it was the first audiovisual library ever inscribed in this program. You see here the vision of the Claude Nobs Foundation, which is to make accessible the Montreux Jazz Archive to the largest number by technological means, of course, but always in compliance with copyrights. And of course, as you can guess, the rights dealing with the rights is always a challenge in this project, but we are lucky in Switzerland because we have an exception on authors' rights for education and research, which means that we can use in the world of research the whole collection. Then, of course, if we want to show that, we have some restrictions, or we have to deal with the musicians and the labels to promote the technology we want. Let me switch now to the archive. A few numbers, I won't be too long, but just for you to figure out, we have 14,000 tapes from 1967, covering different, even more than 18 now. We are always discovering more, actually. So we are still not in the end of digitization. There are content that we are taking care about now, which are more on testimonies about what happened in Montreux, the recordings of the backstage, or interviews, and many things like that. Video, 11,000 hours of recordings, in HD from 1991, as I told you before. Audio, 6,000 hours of recordings, including multi-tracks. So we have the recordings of every instrument alone, which is really a treasure for all the researchers, especially in machine learning. We have pictures, of course. We digitized more than 100,000 pictures from one photographer, Georges Braunschweig, but we would have really more to do. Georges Braunschweig covered the festival from the beginning, so it was really a rich collection. You see here the overlap between the different tape format that were used, or file format, by the way, later on. And you can see that there was always an overlap because the festival wanted to try the latest technology, but they couldn't stop, of course, using the traditional one. So this is really a good thing, because in the end, we have several formats that disappeared, or some tapes that were lost. But since they had more different 3 or 2, usually even 3 formats together, we could recover most of the collection. It's the same or nearly the same in audio. So the idea of the Montreux Jazz Digital Project, it came from a meeting between Claude Nobs and the president of EPFL at the time, Patrick Ebicher, and they all meet together in the chalet in Caux, and Patrick Ebicher could see this wonderful archive, which was stored in the chalet, and immediately he asked the question, do you have a copy of that? Because it's so important, you cannot lose all those testimonies about music. And Claude Nobs said, no, we don't have any copy. It's difficult to organize digitization project for such a big collection. And Patrick said, okay, we could take care about digitization, but then you let us use the content, you give us a license for research and education in EPFL. And that's what happened. And the goal really was twofold: digitize and preserve the collection, and then innovate and do some research and give access to the researchers for this archive. So we built a center, and you see here the list of tasks that we have to perform. Of course, it started with inventory of everything, then creation of a database for metadata. We have a relational database to link all the different contents. The digitization task, we did not perform this by ourselves, except for a few formats. So it was outsourced by specialist companies in France and in Switzerland. Quality control, so we organized everything around digitization, indexing, documentation, storage, preservation, and of course all those tasks related to adding value to the archive and innovate around that. Education started a little bit later. We have now several lectures concerned by the Montreux Jazz Archive or the Montreux Jazz Festival in terms of social and human sciences. Authors' rights, I already mentioned, we had this exception on authors' rights in Switzerland, but the festival signed the contracts as well with the artists, which means that we have different categories of rights that can be used. And this resulted in the construction of a cafe, a Montreux Jazz Cafe on the campus of EPFL, because Claude Nobs, when he had ideas to build Montreux Jazz Cafe, like there are in some airports, in Geneva, Zurich, in Paris, they had rights to use part of the collection. So we built a Montreux Jazz Cafe on the campus at EPFL, which allows us to have one site, physical site, where the public can come as well to look at the collection. I won't be too long on archiving operations. As you can guess, we had lots of tapes to send. We built this database. You will have the slide, so if you want more information about that, you can have a look. We have an interface for the public as well to navigate into this archive. And really the metadata database is the heart of everything, because now it gives access to all the professors or researchers or startups to take this and imagine new projects using the media and the metadata. We did digitize everything in uncompressed to make sure that we have the best quality for the future. And we have several versions of this archive, uncompressed, broadcast, and finally many subformats for previews. And for high definition and standard definition, we have different formats that you can see here. Quality control was a big task to perform. Storage, of course, 2 sets of LTO as usually, plus a hard drive based system with S3 technology. We had a first opportunity with a Belgian company, Amplidata, already in 2012. And then we moved to a product from Western Digital, Active Archive. We have a 3 geosite version of this Active Archive, which allows us to have 1 unit in the festival and 2 units at EPFL. And this is cool because it allows us to really capture the festival during every event in live, and then have immediately the concert files available at EPFL for processing. So that's something we did exploit many times from 2014. Actually, let me skip those slides to explain to you this live archiving ideas that we have. Really recording the concert, storing that immediately after the concert, transcoding in subformats during the night, then indexing the content during the next morning, checking authors' rights in the afternoon, and then we could make available the concert from the previous evening to the public in the venue of the festival, together with the older recordings the next evening. So this was a cool application, and people were really surprised to see how fast we could process the archive and make it available for the public. Indexing was a big task as well. We've been working with a lot of students to cut every song and edit the content in the proper ways. And here you have one of the platform that we can propose to the public in the festival venue. Okay, so let me now go to innovation. I will show you a few examples. Of course, this is not everything we've been covering, but just some examples to show you how this archive can motivate the researchers and how those researchers can help enrich the archive. This is really the dynamics of our project. So here you see the cubes on the ceiling. Those are, this is the first project actually we organized with the acoustic lab of EPFL. Those cubes project sound. This is a speaker actually. They project the sound over an area which is just under it. And as a result, you can have several groups of people listening to different content, and 3 meters away, you can have another group, and you don't disturb each other, and it preserves the social interactions. People don't have to wear headphones. So this was a nice application. And by the way, you see the venue here at the festival where we could show the archive. It was in 2014. The first time we could organize the archive show at the festival. Sorry. Another project was to revive this casino that burned in 1971, and we built a model of the casino from the architecture plans, mimicking the acoustic. This was done with another team at EPFL, able to really, in 3D audio, rebuild the atmosphere, the acoustic atmosphere of a room. And here we, as you can see, we had even the image model, and those people that you see here were invited in a room, and they could really look at the video and fly over the public with the sound moving on with the camera. So it was one of the first immersive platforms we built. Then we moved to other projects using, for example, multi-tracks, here with a company called Future Instruments that built an interface to remix the archive from the multi-tracks. We had projects with those multi-tracks, for example, in an event. This example was organized at the Swiss Culture Institution in Paris. We invited an artist, we remixed the concert, removing an instrument, and then the artist could play instead of the instrument in live in front of the public. VR, we started with VR in 2016 already, recording the concerts from stage with 360 cameras and always using 3D audio. And people could wear the glasses afterwards and really feel on stage with the sound being displayed in 3D with the public in front of them. So it was really a new type of experience that could be proposed to the public of the festival. And you see here the booth that we had organized together with Touraj. Sorry, I have my thread, which is a bit sick now, but
what's he saying right now? You can't see when it's on head mount display actually. This is, I don't believe it. Oh my God, look at this. It's like I'm gonna walk up the stage.
So here you just saw Charles Bradley, a musician in Montreux, discovering his concert afterwards, later in the evening, using the VR recording. Other kind of innovation that we did, this one was precisely organized with the lab of Touraj, trying to detect the defects and remove them from video. We are now on in future project with a PhD thesis about super resolution to increase the quality and rebuild new types of images from the SD, the old SD content, for example. Trying to generate, so in machine learning, we had really a large scale of application that we can organize, typically creating thumbnails for every song. We have 50,000 songs in this collection. So we tried really to generate aesthetic images from the video, trying to go and pick some frames which are judged by an artificial intelligence as beautiful. The Montreux Jazz Galaxy, so this is another project directly linked with the metadata. What you see here on the right, it's a representation of every musician who came to Montreux. And every musician is a point, and if two musicians played together in Montreux, the 2 points are linked with a line, and this gives a kind of galaxy. This was a data visualization work organized with a lab of signal processing. One of the next goals for that kind of things is make that alive in order for young people typically, who usually know maybe the 5 to 10 most recent years of the festival, to go deeper in this archive. Maybe they will pick maybe Pharrell Williams as a musician, and they will see that Pharrell Williams, the guitar, the bass guitar player, was in Montreux 15 years ago. Oh, who was he playing with 15 years before? And they could really discover like this the content. We have several versions of immersive platforms. So you see here the first one designed in 2012 for 2 or 3 people to discover the collection in a kind of box. On the left, you have a door, and they had interfaces with recommendations already at that time to navigate into the collection. The second version of that was increased a little bit larger for 20 people, and it's what you would find in the Montreux Jazz Café at EPFL. And here people can come and look at the archive on big screen with the 3D audio system, even allowing to remix and take the multi-tracks to rebuild the sound and the acoustic of the different halls of the festival. The next generation was mobile. We took a car and modified it. It was a smart to allow 2 people to discover the images. And this can navigate and go to different conferences to promote the project. It even can drive. Not sure if it's legal, but it still drives thanks to a camera. And here you see it entering the chalet of Claude Nobs. It was, if I'm not wrong, in 2016. We have a new professor now for the last 3 years at EPFL in digital, in experimental museology. And with her, it's Sarah Kenderdine, with her we designed this dome, a full dome, allowing people to discover the content in a network. Again, it's a way to show the network of musicians and to select from the artist the different songs that you want to hear. In the field of capture, because we have opportunity to come to the festival and test new ways of capturing the images every year, here you see new ways trying compound imaging. And here you see the company who was involved in that, Ray Shaper, testing their equipment on a boat. Of course, it's much more difficult on something moving to get the quality which is expected with 8K. But we could record from 2 kilometers away one concert of the festival. It was with Elton John, with a lot of zoom and really an impressive quality, increasing the light, of course, because this concert was in the evening. So even from that far away, we could have an incredible zoom with the image being clear. And this is a new way to get that kind of quality. We have a lot of jam sessions in the festival, and that's where we could test as well light field, for example, which is a new technology that we would like to use in immersive ways to show the archive. DNA, Daniel, of course, is here, and we are part of the Alliance. We tried in 2017 to write 2 songs in audio onto DNA. This was, of course, Smoke on the Water from Deep Purple and Miles Davis. We took the song Tutu. And at that time, it took a few weeks, but we could get really the first samples of 24 bits and 48 kilohertz high quality uncompressed audio onto DNA. I think you know the song. Okay, I think I'm nearly at the end of the time. Just to tell you that we have now new projects in social and human science, studying what is the festival, what it does represent in terms of human contact exchanges, how many people did find their job or did find their husband or wife during this festival. We are studying that kind of things with University of Lausanne. And this results in a platform where people can share their souvenirs and the testimonies. We go through campaign of interviews here with the staff of the festival. So we are gathering a collection now of such testimonies, which is complementary to the collection of image and audio recordings. We go more and more to open science projects. Of course, we have trouble with the rights, but we try in collaborations with Wikimedia or with at EPFL, the Swiss Data Science Center, to design platforms which can allow worldwide researchers to use the archive without actually being able to look at it or to access it. So for machine learning, they can really execute the algorithm and get back the metadata they are looking for, but they will not have access to the archive. So this is an interesting way, especially for musicologists, to work with the archive, avoiding the problem of authors' rights. And EPFL would like to go to the open science direction, the open data. And this is a way for us in our project to participate to this action. We have more and more linked with artists as well, with School of Arts, and some of them start using the archive as a way to create new content, to fill in the gap typically in this archive, because of course sometimes we have lost some of the content. Why not working with artists to regenerate that and imagine the future of archiving? With the COVID situation, we tried to help the cultural world to find solutions, and especially the Montreux Jazz Festival, to try and use the archive for promoting or keeping a presence for the festival, because it was of course cancelled in 2020. But how to find the best ways in technology to help those institutions keeping a link with their public. So we tried to launch a cultural innovation program. It was with the Digital Humanities Center of EPFL. I think I will stop it. Thank you for your attention. You have an image of the Montreux Jazz Café at EPFL here, where, of course, you are invited to come whenever you come through Lausanne. And I would have pleasure, of course, to welcome you and organize a visit of this ecosystem we have here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alain. This is fascinating. Technology developers, and especially in the case of archival and DNA storage, it's very important to see how and where the content that is being archived is used. This gives us concrete scenarios, concrete use cases, and I think that this kind of presentation are extremely important. This makes us discover that things are a little bit more than just storing typical images and video and audio, but there is a lot even today being done for 360 and for light field and metadata, and importance of archival of metadata and access to metadata. These are all also very, very important things that we need to keep in mind. All right, so what I'm going to do is that, as promised, I will now stop the recording,